Growth Climate has solutions. Growth Climate has set the standard in personal and professional development. Growth Climate training will give you more confidence, more job satisfaction, increased profits, and stronger personal and professional relationships. Growth Climate, the standard in personal and professional development.
This last section, section 14, is almost like the cherry on the ice cream sundae, if you will. Because what it is a discussion of an exciting process that already occurs in human beings. It is an innate process. It isn't something that Growth Climate created. It is an exciting discovery of how to access what is beneath your own reaction sequences, what is beneath your own pain or the stress that surfaces. Let me tell you how this came about. Originally, when we began teaching courses, out of the awarenesses we had, in fact, I had been teaching originally a skill training class for a company that's based out of state. It taught 6 skills and concepts. And as I began teaching that, I found myself saying, this is a little bit manipulative. And the first time I taught it, I added 2 principles to try and stop what I could see as a potential manipulation. At the end of a year of teaching it, I had added 17 principles to the 6 concepts in an effort to not turn out manipulators, because people were beginning to memorize the lines and wanting to learn how to say that. They'd say, oh, could you repeat that again? I want to write it down. I wasn't after them learning lines. I wanted them to kind of sense what was happening and get a feeling for it. And I said to my wife, I said, you know, there'd be a lot more power if we could teach principle rather than technique. And she said, then so why don't you? And so I created a course that had 4 principles. I mentioned a few moments ago that we took number 3 and expanded it out, so we ended up with 5, the 5 we've just talked about. So as we were teaching principle, almost immediately we began seeing an interesting phenomenon. Individuals who had had the class would call us. It used to be, with the skill training class, we would get as much as 20 to 30 hours of phone calls. This happened, and I said, and he said, what should I have said? And that was what led us to say, what is happening here? It isn't really solving the problems. So when we began teaching principle, I left the same thing open as I did with you. Call if you have a question that you don't understand. We would get maybe an hour in a month of phone call total, and it would be, Ken, I just wanted to tell you what's happened. I got in a circumstance, and what I normally would have done was this, and I did this instead. Did I do okay? And it began to be exciting. Then there was another kind of call. They said, you know, I've been troubled by something for years. I didn't even know what it was. And as I've tried diligently to operate with integrity with myself and be committed to my own growth and to be affirming of others and to literally be responsible for my choices and to trust those gut feelings that I've been turning down for so long, I'm beginning to find out things about myself I didn't know. I'm unhooking from things that have troubled me for years, and I'm free. And so we'd say, tell us about that. My wife came to me one day. She usually took most of those calls. She said, Ken, I'm seeing a pattern here. It's happening in so many individuals from different classes. There's got to be something to it that's replicatable. I said, so describe it. She described it. I said, let me give you another component or 2. And in 30 minutes, the process for accessing your beliefs was on paper. We didn't create the process. We observed it, and we wrote it down. And what we have done since that discovery, which was literally in the fall of 1982, just barely over a year and a half after we started, we have been concentrating our efforts in getting the principles in to the participants, so that you too can apply this for yourself and deal with issues. Let's walk through a few things in this section of the manual And let me call your attention to them. We're not going to do a great deal with what's in here because it's written in sufficient detail, but I want to at least hit a couple of things. We have 3 different kinds of stress. If you look over a couple of pages, there can be situational stress, there can be physiological stress, and there can be emotional stress. The thing that's interesting to me is that here in the middle we have a list of symptoms. These are symptoms that show up usually in a particular individual regardless of the source of the stress. In other words, we tend to get stressed in a particular way no matter what the stress is. I have a friend that the second he is in trouble, he gets a knot in his right leg. He's in stress. It doesn't matter what triggered it. That's how it shows up in his body. For me, when I go in stress, I get a pain in my back. I had a man, somebody said, I get a pain in the neck. And I said, maybe your wife thinks that too. Somebody else said, I think maybe I had said, almost forgot this. I had said, oftentimes the body's stress attacks the weakest part. And the guy says, what if that had explained my headaches? Well, our stress shows up in characteristic ways. Sometimes situational stress can provoke emotional. Your house burns down and you didn't realize you hadn't paid your insurance premium. That provokes, why didn't I check this? Why am I not on top of my business records if I'd really been doing what I should? And you kind of beat yourself to death. And any one of these stress can provoke physiological kinds of things. So that's something that you can look at on your own. The next page or two talks about sources of stress, and there are 12, and all of these are detailed. I don't want to talk about those. You can read them. What I do want to talk about, though, is something called stress overload. Each of us develops a capacity to operate within an acceptable band of behavior. That band may be defined by other people, and so we know that we can't go here or can't go there because others won't tolerate it, but we get in stress nonetheless, and we start to get more and more stressed. And the second our stress turns into behavior that is not acceptable, people say, we don't act that way in this setting. And you go, whoops, and you come back down here. But pretty soon it gets high enough and out it bursts again. How many times do I have to tell you? And we are in stress overload. However, if the pressure becomes so strong and nobody's helping you deal with whatever it is that provokes this, you might say nobody cares anyway, and pretty soon you're down here on a pity party, at least that's what everybody else thinks. Will you quit sulking around the house? You always have to go around with that hangdog look on your face. And so we get people who have these highs and they have these lows, and there are terms for that in the field. And when we get into that manic depressive kind of concept, bipolar, we end up being prescribed medication to help kind of calm that. Let me pose an interesting thought for you. The more emotional you are, what is the more being dumped into your system? Chemical. Have you ever heard of something called chemical imbalance? If you are on a constant emotional chain yank, and every time you turn around, your emotions are very, very high, your body's just being bathed in a chemical bath that matches the emotions you have, is it any wonder that your medications, if you're on them, kind of go out of whack? But is it also any wonder, those of you who are therapists, when you're working with a client who is on medication and they start to heal, what has to happen with the medication? They have to have it adjusted downward. Why? Because the body isn't being kicked into those stress points where the chemical imbalance is being thrown out of whack. So as soon as you have somebody who is emotionally uptight, know that that chemical dump is going to disrupt the system, physiologically, mentally, and so on. Well, what I'd like you to do is to go over to page 13. Kevin, let's put this model up, and you're going to see some interesting parallels. Somebody asked the question at the break, I don't know if I can remember how it was asked. It escapes me for a minute. If you remember it when I start doing this, you can tell me. Remember this little diagram from the first night in the intro where we had misbehavior, Misbehavior is typically the outgrowth of or manifestation of stress, so we misbehave, but something provoked that, and that's the stimulus down here, and this is a response. We typically pound on the symptom, don't we? What was our target? We should be going for the root cause, whatever that is. And in most cases, more than not, in human behavior, the root cause is belief linked. So when you go into high stress, what should your target be?
Belief.
To access the belief. You can't force that. There are those who think if you can put enough pressure on an individual, what they believe, typically beliefs that are in error, erroneous, or whatever, will come to the surface. Yes, they will. You can badger a person, particularly in a public setting, into finally blurting out what's really bothering them. But oftentimes, under that kind of pressure, if the person is a stressee and they blurt it out, all of a sudden something they have kept hidden and buried and suppressed or repressed because it's too frightening is all of a sudden there in vivid, livid color, and it is so frightening it hurts. It hurts them. I remember back in the first days of sensitivity training, T groups and counter groups, that there were more people being harmed by that experience than being helped because they were pressured to the point in a group setting that they divulged all of this, and then people would stomp all over their feelings, telling them they shouldn't feel that way. And then those people were hurt because nobody put them back together. The few that maybe had therapists had some help, but those in group settings, large groups, didn't have that opportunity. So the first thing I want to say to you in this process, never force it. Those things will come to the surface as you're ready to deal with it. If you start this process, and this is where I use the phrase in one of our earlier sections about R&R. If you can R&R, rant and rave, in a setting where nobody is going to be critical or condemnatory, you will go down through layer after layer after layer after layer. Sometimes these will simply be issues, other issues. Sometimes it's a belief, literally. Sometimes it is an event. But in that process, if you are operating with integrity, you are applying those 5 principles with yourself, you will be able to go from this stress point down to the belief that governs your behavior. Please.
The victim, or whatever you want to call the individual, is R&Ring, and in their process of this healing, I guess you would refer it to as, they are hurting others in the family. Then how do you handle that situation?
First of all, I would never do this process in front of anybody else. If you're doing this with a therapist, it's very easy. He'll sit there and he'll take some notes, and when it's done, he'll hand you your notes. If you have a trusted friend, that's a little tricky because you never know what's going to come out of that R&R. More important, sit down with a piece of paper on your own and write your thoughts. Literally write what thoughts are going through your mind. Know that this is a process.
Well, maybe I'm referring more to the misbehavior part of it.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to hammer on the misbehavior. I'm going to go for what's beneath it. Let's take, for example, a circumstance. I'm going to have to do this one kind of as a monologue, and I'm going to play 2 responses here. Let's say that we have a 16-year-old boy who has quit school. That's his misbehavior. He quit. He's home early from school. I don't know if you'll be able to see me if I sit in a chair here or not. I'll sit in this one. I'm going to be a 16-year-old that's quit school, and you are my parent, except I'm going to play your role and mine in the interest of time on this one. I'm home an hour early, and in you walk. And give me a second to think 16, okay? In you walk, and you want to know why I'm home. What are you doing home? Having Kool-Aid. Don't be lippy with me. Shouldn't you be in school? No, school's out. No, it isn't. I saw all the cars still at school. Well, it's out for me. Ha! What do you mean it's out for you? I quit and I'm not going back, so how do you like them apples? Oh, yes, you are going back. No, I'm not. And besides, they wouldn't take me back anyway. That principal of the school, he's an absolute jerk. And I tried to tell him why I was late for my second period class. He doesn't listen. And he tried to hand me a detention slip. And do you think I'm going to detention? No, I'm not. I said, I've got a good reason. He said, there are no reasons. And I said, I've got one. And he wouldn't listen. And I ended up flipping him the bird. And I left school, and I'm now going back, and you can't make me. Now, you see, that's a problem, isn't it? Now, if you're a force mode parent, where am I going to be? Right back in school, right? Well, isn't that where you'll put me? That's where you'll want to put me. Can you make me go to school? Oh, some parents think they can. I knew one parent that let his kid off in the front of the high school at 9 o'clock in the morning, picked him up at 3 o'clock. What he didn't know is the kid went out the back door. One of his friends came in the back door at 5 to 3, out the front door with his books. It didn't help. You can lead a kid to the classroom, but you can't make him think. That was a bad one. Well, let me tell you what I think happens. Can we get hammering away on this business of quitting school? Yes, we can. No kid of mine is going to end up quitting school, and you're going to go on to college if you're worth your salt. And if you got a brain in your head, it better be a PhD. See, and can I tell you, I think school's dumb, and you can tell me that it isn't, and you will have me over here on a horizontal tangent that takes me away from solving this problem. I may not even know what it is, but if you hammer on my symptom, the chances are very high I will do exactly what I have done and stay out of school. What I understand is that if this kid has had some kind of a provocation that has triggered this response, something is happening to this kid, particularly if this behavior is not consistent with his usual pattern. Well, he lips off about the principal being an absolute jerk. He's a reject from somewhere. Now, we don't talk about adults disparaging like this. We speak appropriately, and you'll lower your voice tone with me too now. Have you got that clear? You see, I'm not going to go anywhere else. Can we talk about the principal being a jerk? You might even say, well, if you've got a problem getting from one end of the building to the other and being tardy, maybe what the school needs to do is lengthen the time of the break between classes. That isn't the issue. Oh, it might be, and if that's the issue, the kid's going to jump onto that one and let you solve it. But that isn't going to do it either. And somewhere down through this, through issues with somebody putting gum in his lock, which is why he was late, and that it's his stupid friend Kevin who did it. But then he can't be mad at Kevin because he put gum in Kevin's lock last week. You see, that was kind of interesting, but Kevin's still a jerk, so it went another layer deeper. It had to do with Kevin, but it had nothing to do with gum. And all of a sudden, and this is what you will find, the child or the adult, doesn't matter, instead of being highly intense, the closer he gets to that belief, the more calm he will become. Watch the emotional line and watch it in yourself. The closer you get to the real issue, you think, oh my gosh, it's going to be more scary. Well, if it's a scary one, drop it and shelve it and come back to it later. But when you find yourself becoming more and more calm, you will literally access the belief that is governing all of this. In this particular story, what if Kevin had taken out the girl he was going to take to a game on Saturday? And he was all set to take her, and Kevin's got her going to a game. What's that going to do to his attention level in English Lit class? And 3 times he gets scolded for not paying attention. I'm describing my own high school, by the way. English Lit in the northeast corner. Come out, have to change your books in the locker, get all the way downstairs, clear to the southwest corner of the school for chemistry class, the one with the red book. It was that exact classroom. And Mr. Kyle stood there like a vulture right at that junction of the hallway, and if you were late, he had a pad of detention slips already filled out with the date stamp on it, and he just writes your name, detention Patey, detention Johnson, and he never listened to anybody. And he was kind of a jerk, except that he wasn't. He had a huge school. called me in the office. Patey, get into my office. Oh, gosh. Got into his office, and he closed the door. He said, sit down there. Oh, what have I done? And he said, how's it going, son? Gee. Oh. You know, he took a stern role publicly, but he was really a very warm person. Well, could it be something as simple as this, that a boy could react and literally the whole world's against him? He's lost his date. He has to replace the lock. The principal gives him detention. He tries to talk it through, loses his cool, flips him the bird, and he's now out of school. But if you as parents hammer on that behavioral symptom of something else that's troubling the boy, you will never get to the root cause. But the second you solve this other issue, like maybe that if he'd asked the girl the day before when she didn't have a date with Kevin, she might have said yes. Ooh, my gosh, maybe I just asked too late. Now, that's a very condensed story. But I do submit, and I want to say it as strongly as I can, I believe that more kids take tangents in directions they would not otherwise have gone when we spend our time pounding on the symptoms rather than helping them get to root causes. It is a process. We have available an 8-week, 2-hour-a-week session, training session, workshop on this process. It's all we do in that workshop series. There are a lot of things available. We have a workshop series that deals with how to interface with another principality, like your employer, like your group you work with, the agency you're with other individuals, without losing your own identity. There are answers. There are ways to access the things that have disrupted your lives and have you captive, doing things you really don't want to do, or unable to accomplish what you'd like to accomplish. I told the story in one of our earlier sections about the 8-year-old boy in Ronan, Montana, who hit his head on the rock, and whose brother said, you're lucky you have any brains at all. They all leaked out on the rock. It impacted him for 30 years until he dealt with the issue and hit the event where he had put into his mind, I really don't have enough brains to succeed. And it had impacted his ability to earn a living all that time. Not anymore, because he accessed it. You see, the mind will give you, if we come back to this one on the board, when you hit this belief, your mind will give you all the evidence that proves this was so. This will be the information over the years that cemented this thing as true. But remember, how many recordings does the mind make? 2. 1, your perception of the event. That's this one that validated this belief. It also has another recording, the actual event exactly the way it occurred. And if you can learn to ask your own brain to give you the other data, it's like, oh, up will come the mind screen. Just as easily as the mind screen of validation for your warped belief will surface, so will the validation for the information that will disprove and discount the things which you thought were so, but in reality are not. You have the answers. I don't. The thing that's interesting for me as a therapist, and that is in all the work I have done with clients in the uprooting stress process, only 3 times, and I'm very good at it, only 3 times was I able to guess the root cause looking at the surface or the presenting issues, Jürgen. You think, well, obviously it's going to lead here. And when you start listening to somebody R&R, if you're a therapist, and you hear them start talking, you say, well, obviously it's this. No, it isn't obvious. Maybe you're right and maybe you aren't. So you get one of these ahas, you say, well, let's see if it's true. You're going to be surprised where it goes. Guess who else is surprised? The person who's in stress. They are usually surprised by what they experience and what they learn. Well, 2 things I want to do. I want to read to you a quotation that comes from a recently deceased Church of England clergyman, C.S. Lewis, prolific writer, Screw Tape Letters, Chronicles of Narnia, and many, many others. Wonderful writer. He wrote It is a serious thing, he said, to live in a society of possible gods or goddesses, to recognize that the most interesting person you meet may one day be a creature which you would be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare. All day long, he said, we are helping one another to one or another of these destinations. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and circumspection due them, that we should conduct all our dealings with one another, all friendships, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked, he said, to a mere mortal. Native cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal, and their life to ours is as the life of an ant. But it is immortals we joke with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. Each one of you, and for some of you, contrary to what you may have come to believe about yourselves, are everlasting splendors. The inside you is brilliant, alive, vibrant, full of hope. And you can, with a set of tools, access whatever it is that has kept you locked, that keeps you doing what you don't want to do, or keeps you from becoming what you'd like to become. I would like, if I may, invite you to respond to a question of mine. What in this almost 11 hours of time we have spent together, and obviously 11 hours won't cover what's in this manual, will it? What of all of this material has impacted you the most? Are there a number of you who would be willing to respond to that question? Thank you. Please.
A lot of the materials that we've learned are life-changing, and that's probably what I appreciate most. But if I'm in a situation where somebody's misbehaving, and this could be somebody at work, could be a family member, even a friend, I will no longer react to that situation or to that misbehavior, but I'll try and get at the root of the problem, and try and see if we can help each other, and I can help him or her.
Thank you. Good for you. Please, Ann?
For a whole lifetime of my work experience, I think I've been a bit of a black sheep, and accepted that as meaning I, was most likely going to be in trouble, and labeled as being inflexible. And I think after this class, I believe I'm principled.
Good for you. Thank you. Someone else, what has impacted you the most? Please.
For my entire life, as early as I have recollection, I have had low self-worth, many times to the point of the closed-down sequence. It has caused me to have 2 abusive marriages. It has impacted my 4 children. My life continues to be a journey trying to find out why my life has gone this way. The growth climate material gives me hope that not only for myself but for my children, there's a future beyond the past.
Thank you very much. Adriana?
I work with a lot of victims in my profession, and something that I never realized that we are not following the prompting our intuition. Many times we block them out, and many of my clients then don't talk what they feel. They're afraid. They don't want to take a risk. And after what I heard from you, I think I want to encourage them to really follow their instinct, trust themselves. I think that was a really wonderful point, and it's going to encourage me also to keep doing it. Follow my hunch, and many times that's the way to go. Nobody knows what is best for us than ourselves.
Thank you very much. Someone else, what has impacted you the most? Please.
kind of the same thing as following your instincts. I've tried to do that a little more lately, and with testing it, it turns out that what I really am, my gut feeling is right, and that just what you said just confirms that, and put it all together with all of the other information that you gave us. It gives me a lot of tools to do things a lot different.
Thanks, Rayanne. Someone else, please.
Knowing that there's a cycle that happens and recognizing my part in that cycle, I'm hoping will help me work with my 3 kids and my immediate family to show them that this cycle can be broke. That's all I can really hope for right now, but it does give me hope, knowing that the cycle exists, and the things that I've been feeling over the last year hasn't been me going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, over the last 4 or 5 months, got in touch with my instincts and been following my instincts. And it's made me a heck of a lot better person than I was even a year ago. So whatever happens from this point on, I know that I can go on and be a better person than I was before from this point on.
Good for you. Thanks very much. Jürgen?
Personally, I really like the pragmatism of the material and how accessible it is. It's a really, I think, a very accessible way of analyzing and looking at what happens between people. And I thought what I'm taking out of this today and yesterday is some tools on how to communicate that to some of my clients and others I get in contact with, as well as applying it in my own life.
Good. Thank you very much. Those of you who are here as professionals in the helping profession, working with others, anything being triggered for you?
I found it an interesting insight to think that perpetrators operate on instinct, because so often we're working with women who are trying to leave a situation, and we know from statistics that leaving is the most dangerous time period, but now we know why. Because that instinct says she's leaving, she's leaving, she's leaving.
And they're right back there at the moment they thought, finally I've got a time to be free, and they're nabbed. It's true. Let me express to you my appreciation for your willingness to share, your willingness to ask questions, your willingness to be on camera, and my appreciation for the opportunity to rub shoulders with you. I have benefited by this experience with you. I have been enriched by what you've shared at the breaks. I wish you well in your own personal pursuits. I wish you well as you reach out to strengthen and lift and empower others. Go share what you've learned. Be noisy about what you've learned. Don't hold it back, but lift and strengthen others by what you gain personally. Thank you very, very much.